real quick question. Is anyone from facilities in the same room with anyone else on a laptop? They'll need to move to another room. They can't be in the same room with those laptops or microphones, or we'll get that loop.
Okay.
Valerie, give us a thumbs up. Do we have comments?
We do not. We have not received any.
No comment.
All right. So being that there's no public comment from the email, moving to item 301, approval of the prior minutes. I have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second, Patty Carlson.
All right, motion from Debbie and second from Patty. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Minutes are approved. 3.02, reports by staff or liaison representatives. If you have anything to report, please raise your hand. Or Patty, do you have anything to report from yours?
You know, I don't at this time just because of the environment, and I apologize with the feedback. I had an opportunity to speak, but we needed to close the loop on it. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine. I understand it's not likely we're going to be meeting in groups with people at this time, or have been for the last few months. So is there any other I called on Patty because I can't see her hand raised. I believe I can see everybody else's hand to be raised. If you have something to report as a liaison, could you just raise your hand? All right, seeing no liaison reports, we'll move on to section 303, report by the Clark County Board of Trustees liaison. Who is here to do that today? Is anyone here to do that? I don't see a member of the Board of Trustees on. Am I wrong on that, Gail or Valerie? You know?
I see no trustees present in the chat currently.
Yeah, you're correct. There's no one.
Okay. Being no member of the Board of School of Trustees present, moving to item 304, Capital Improvement Program Status Report.
Hi, this is Rodney Phelps for the record. If we can go ahead and put up 3.04A on the screen. As we see, we have proceeds revenue of $1.7 billion. Currently, we're in the process of doing our due diligence to go out and raise another $200 million, which we anticipate to be completed by the end of June. Obviously, if we get that, then that number will increase. We have just under 1.4 billion of expenses dedicated to our projects, with another 244 million, which is encumbered at this time. If you look at our overall balance, we have $321.9 million that shows our revenue over our expenditures at this point in time. Obviously, as our expenses go up and our encumbrance goes down, then that number will change. As we typically do, we raise bond proceeds every 6 months. So we typically run it around the end of June, and we will proceed and move forward potentially by the end of December, if not sooner. Are there any questions on this document?
Yeah, this is Chad. I have a couple questions. You mentioned that you're on your normal schedule to go out and raise funds. Have you looked at potentially either refinancing any of the debt that we currently have, or accelerating any bond issuance, just with the current state of the low interest rates and kind of where interest is heading?
We continually work with Zions to analyze that type of refunding. The problem is that the federal government also changed refunding rules, which prevented it, made it more restrictive. We have refunded in the past. Currently, most of what we refunded is already at low rates, and obviously we're going to be under somewhat of potential restrictions on how much we go out and trying to ask in bond refunds in the current environment. Since there's a lot of uncertainty, we feel that we can still issue bonds at this point in time, but obviously as they get more information related to what's affecting the state revenues and so forth, then it might become more restrictive in the future. But something we can't answer at this time. However, like I said, if Scions comes to us and says we need to refund some of our bond debt, then we will move forward with that in the future.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
Question, Rodney. This is Jacob Reynolds for the record. What is the current rate that you're looking at for that 200 million?
I believe the interest rate was going to come in 2.9, if I recall correctly.
Thank you.
However, obviously that's predicated on the fact of what transpires at the point in time. So once the bond issues are issued, then we'll get the true rate. This particular issuance, we're doing a negotiated agreement with JP Morgan. Because of the environment, we thought it was more necessary to guarantee that we have the appropriate people to buy the bonds.
Okay.
Question, Walter Jones.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rodney, have we, with the board being here, have we ever thought about doing a private partnership where we can get rates and then there's more money that we can have to use as far as staff, teachers? If we can go in and do a private partnership with someone, have we ever thought about that?
I'm not sure what you mean by a private partnership.
Well, private partnership is where we go out and find a developer to come in and they build a project and we lease it back from them for so many years with a buyout. So that frees up money.
This is Jeff Wagner, for the record. Walter, we have explored private-public partnerships for certain buildings.
Mm-hmm.
However, that would not allow us to free up bond funding to be used for general expenses.
No, not for, well, yeah, right. Well, I understand. I'm sorry for saying that. Yeah, we can't free it up for that, but we can free it up for other things.
Yeah, so we are currently in the process of exploring public-private partnerships for facilities moving forward. I know it has been done in the past, and for various reasons, the school district chose not to enter into those agreements in the past. I'm working on a couple projects with the team currently that are at least exploring public-private partnership.
Okay, can you
just on the future?
Can you get us some information on ones that we already done and see if we can entertain that?
To my knowledge, the projects that were that they explored those options for in the past are over 10 years old. So
okay.
Happy to go back and do some research. That was before my time here in Bond. So I don't have specifics on those projects.
Okay.
Yeah,
Appreciate you, Jeff.
this is Patty Charlton. I've been able to connect finally remotely. And Jeff, thank you for that answer, because I know that was the P3 kind of concept with public-private partnerships was something that I know I had brought up previously, and really looking at how we can leverage finances and debt service later down the road, as well as supporting if they're constructed the appropriate way. You'd also have some of the deferred maintenance that is such a difficult thing to accomplish be addressed. So if it's something that may not be able to be done with bond proceeds, but if we can just look at how that might be able to be leveraged, that would be great. Thank you very much.
This is Yvette Williams. I have a question regarding our last meeting before the pandemic. You were planning and we approved a plan around increasing the staff. Have you received any impact from Dr. Jar, as far as the budget goes of the Board of Trustees, how is that plan impacted now? Because you were planning a pretty aggressive staffing plan to address all these maintenance issues that we have.
This is Rodney Fouts. I mean, I can deflect to Jeff as well, but we're proceeding forward with our plan to hire the individuals. Ultimately, we're restricted in the fact of how many people we can hire and how many people are qualified, whatever appropriate amount of time that we're looking at. So that nothing has been interfering with that process of what we're trying to do there. The reality is since it is capital funds, it obviously is not predicated to what the general operating fund does. So we have more leeway in this particular item to do the things that we need to do as opposed to what we would be restricted for possibly in the general fund with budget restraints.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rodney, this is Patty Charlton again. I apologize. Can I ask a follow-up to Ms. Williams, her question? Obviously, you're going to be looking at, as we all are, the appropriateness and not so much the appropriateness, but the level of impact of this current environment. I was a little surprised personally to find staffing on a bond issuance because that then gets financed with salaries. Is there any, I mean, obviously, if you could just answer it, would there be some kind of swapping back and forth if the regular budget gets cut and those people need to move on to the bond? Is that something that's being explored? And if this is outside of the agenda item, I totally get it. And if it's not appropriate, please let me know.
No, the general contract.
Good question.
Okay.
So obviously bond funds have certain restrictions to them. So only personnel that are completing that bond work can be bond funded. So as of right now, we are going to continue to issue bonds, and our plans for bond projects have not been highly impacted as of today. Of course, subject to change at any day. I do know in the last bond issuance, last downturn, to my knowledge, the school district was asked to shift bond funds to cover operating expenses. Now that's something that has to come from the governor's office. We don't have the option to do that internally. So we have not filled those positions that were approved for various reasons. We had a lot of HR system changes and things here early in the year, and they're just getting that figured out. So those positions have not been filled, but we do intend to move forward and fill those positions and increase essentially the rate in which we are completing bond projects until we're given opposing direction.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Rodney, is this the only thing you have on your presentation?
No, we can go to 3.04B and just go to the last page. It's obviously all the projects in progress. I just want to highlight there is that we have a current projects budgeted at $3.74 billion.
And just a question on that might be for Jeff as well. Has there been any slowdown on the construction sites for these or change in dates because of the COVID crisis?
This is Jeff Wagner. Jacob, we've experienced some minor delays in projects, but overall, no. We've been able to mitigate most of the delays from COVID-19, and since the governor established construction as an essential activity, we have not repositioned or replanned or delayed projects in any major capacity.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Patty, you have a question?
Yeah, Jacob, I do. Hey, I just wanted to ask, and this might be for Rodney and for Jeff together. In this environment, obviously, we've been working under the assumptions of a very escalated construction costing model. I have a feeling that we're going into a different environment at this point in time. Have you guys given any consideration to the new norm based on obviously the environment that we're in, that construction pricing may be coming down? I know that that's been realized in a number of public projects to date, that estimates, while we were working with the best information that we had available. We're finding that that's coming down, so that might actually free up resources. But have you updated any of your assumptions, and or is this just kind of going on with what we had at the time when we were all in our normal business operations?
This is Robbie. The current budget figures you see here are based on what we've previously projected. Obviously, at this point in time, we have not seen costs go down, but I've had conversations with Jeff, and he can chime in on this, is that we anticipate, as you just said, that there's going to be less projects being worked on. We've seen delays on some of the major projects, of which some will restart and others potentially may not, depending on what happens in the economy. We also see that will free up more construction companies probably wanting to do business with us. And then as we see that happen, then obviously we can start looking at our numbers on the projects that we have on the books that we haven't started yet and go from there.
Yeah, if I can hear from Jeff first, and then I have a follow-up to that, please.
Yeah. Jeff Wagner for the record. So as Rodney mentioned, to date, we haven't seen significant cost decreases in the bids that have gone out very recently. However, nationwide, construction jobs lost 975,000 positions. We have contractors expressing concern about supply chains and what doing business in the future with COVID-19 may mean. So we've had conversations on both sides that in some areas costs may increase, general conditions, making sure that they have the right sanitation on site. And obviously, as an owner, we'll end up absorbing some of those costs. On the other side, there will be more resources available. So as long as supply chains stay strong, we can get the material. We see the labor market being more flexible, and having better access to that labor. I do expect in the third quarter of this year, we are going to see. No, I think Walter. Can you hear me now, Patty?
I sure can, thank you.
So we are anticipating in the third quarter of this year that we will start to see significant cost savings, as well as more contractor participation in our bids.
Okay, thank you. And if I can just ask, Jeff, this is a question for you as a follow-up. I know that obviously you've gone through a comprehensive design and planning process on all of these. On the projects to date, and while hopefully we're only looking at maybe a 12 to 18 month window of time where spacing and other kinds of considerations in the design process may be required, obviously until we can get a vaccine of some kind, are you expecting any changes to the plans and the programs and the designs that have been put in place that need to maybe be reevaluated and or considered as you move forward in this environment? And hopefully it's not an extended time frame, but we're going to be building some buildings, and we've got some regulations that we are certain that are going to be imposed upon us that may impact the work that your team is doing. And obviously it's good that we finally got a little bit of guidance from the CDC. And I know that we're waiting for that from the state. So I just wondered if you have any thoughts around that, because I know overall, I think we're all looking at some changes to the way that we have our facilities, the way that we're designing, and the way that we're using them, at least in this period of time. It may be an interim, but we really don't know what that looks like.
Jeff Wagner for the record. There's no easy answer to that, to be honest, Patty. There are a lot of, obviously we're involved in conversations every single day about what the new normal will look like and how we will operate schools as we move forward. I can tell you the school district has an active reopening committee that has begun to do that work. We're very, very early in the work, so there are no final decisions. We've been keeping our hands on the pulse of proposed code changes that are coming out. So we're seeing things like no-touch faucets becoming not a luxury, but a code requirement, door openers, things of that nature. We've been in consultation with many of our architects about how we could use the original buildings and still maintain social distancing. We will be bringing some of that information back to the Bond Oversight Committee, but as of right now today, I don't have any definitive decisions. All I can tell you is that we're working diligently towards exploring all options in anticipation of further information coming forward from both the CDC, the state, and the Nevada Department of Education, and obviously our own CCSD reopening committee.
Great, thank you, Jeff, appreciate that.
Walter Jones.
Go ahead, Walter.
On that question before that, cost is going to go up on construction. Materials going to get higher, especially with the CDC. Now everything is going to be touchless. So cost of construction on material is going to go up. So are we prepared for that? Because now you're talking about, compared to a $60 faucet, now you're talking about putting in a $300 to $400 faucet. Now we're talking about, instead of having door handles, now we're going with a device that's going to cost us $2,000 to $3,000 per doors. So cost is going up. So are we prepared for them costs that's going up?
Jeff Wagner for the record. Walter, we've had conversations, and there's really two camps. There's much like your opinion that we will be required to do more things by code that will be more expensive. We're required to make spaces larger. There's also a camp that believes that much like during the last recession, we will have a glut of available material and make it.
Okay.
So we have not, we're analyzing both sides of it, and as we get our bids in and get real data, then Rodney constantly goes back and reevaluates our projection.
So are we prepared to add that into the older schools too? Because you've got to take consideration, we got new schools that's going in that changes have to be made. So now we're looking at, have you negotiated that with the contractor? There's going to be a change order because the price have changed for certain things. They have to go in the restrooms now and the device that goes on the doors. So we know that's considered a change order.
That if we change the scope of work, we would issue a change order. However, these are very preliminary conversations, and the codes have not changed to require those things as of today.
Okay. All right.
As always, we're restricted in the amount of funds that we have. So
right.
Ultimately, if we have to do some of those items, it may require that we don't do other projects.
This is, Walter, are you done with your question? I'm going to.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Ms. Lee.
This is Yvette Williams. So I have a question concerning some of the CARE Act money. Can any of those funds be used towards these renovations that Walter's referring to, or is it only, no, money certified for that? So has there been any conversation with the district around funds coming over to the facilities? And if so, is there an amount that's kind of being tossed around?
So,
Superintendent Jara.
this is Superintendent Jara here. Thank you. I'm sorry, Rodney and Jeff, if I'm
No, welcome. You can answer that much better.
Yeah, well, I don't know much better. I can give you what I know. So thank you for the question, Yvette. The CARE Act, we're projected to receive about $82 million right now from the state, from the federal government to come in. There's specific I would say buckets for the $82 million. And as you know, that it cannot be used the state has to maintain their level of funding. So it can't be used to put a gap in to fill a gap from the state budget. So that's number one. We're waiting right now on the $82 million. Our team is already looking in for the application. The only thing that I would say that has an impact here would be for cleaning supplies and different things that can be used for some of what we're talking about with the building structure or changes to that. The other piece that it has to do with actually instructional support and supporting for our needs. We're applying for the money to come in, but we're waiting to see what the budget reduction from the state at this point is to the DSA. We don't have that number yet, but once we do, we'll be able to make some of those decisions. So it can be used for construction or any of these renovations that we're talking about. It can only be used for cleaning, and I know that's what Jeff and the maintenance team has been intimately involved. My concern that with the CDC guidelines, that we don't have enough money for either. So that's why we're hoping that the state, that the federal government approves this fifth $3 trillion budget that was just approved by the House.
And my last question related to this is concerning the new CTAs that we just approved. I know they're in planning stages right now. Do we have an estimated date that, in particular, the North CTA will be online? And in answering that question, I'm also curious as to why the name change. I thought it was North CTA, but I'm seeing Northeast CTA. So then that, so now I'm asking, where will that be located, the site? Did that change, or is it still going to be over near Liberty?
Jeff Wagner for the record. We anticipate that school opening in the fall of 2023, and the location has not changed. Our anticipation is to use the parcel immediately adjacent to Liberty High School.
Is there a reason we changed the name to Northeast from North?
Not to my knowledge. It's been referred to as North. Where did you see Northeast?
On your list here, on your.
We can change that. It's just, we probably pick it up another document, and that's how it got put on there.
Yeah, 'cause that's the only thing I'm concerned about. The messaging has been North CTA, and Northeast is really further east. Where it's going to be located in Liberty is definitely north and not north. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Is there anything additional, any additional questions on Rodney Fouts' presentation? We have had Trustee Wright. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Rodney, for your presentation. Is there anything else you had to say?
No, I'm good. As long as everybody else is.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. We've had Trustee Wright join the call since then, so I'd like to go back to item 303. Trustee Wright, are you able to hear us, and can you give us your report?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I know it's been a while since we've met, so I think it's important that this meeting occurred, even though, you know, there's not a ton of necessarily pressing business. I think it was important that we had some sort of touch base. So I did miss the beginning, but I did hear a little bit, and I am on the reopening working group committee, and our timeline is quite tight. We've broken out into subgroups, and the subgroups are working. We had a meeting day before yesterday. We meet again today. We meet again Friday. We meet again Tuesday, and then we present our subgroup findings to the larger group on Wednesday. So, and then from there, the larger group will discuss those. I think that might be 2 different meetings because we have, I think it's 5 subgroups. And then what will happen is it'll kind of get whittled down to some real meat and potato ideas instead of, you know, all the different things. We're talking about everything on the table right this minute. And then we will bring in the experts, transportation, you know, budget, all those kinds of things, and talk about the realities of all these different things and what the cost could and would be, you know, fiscally, what we can and can't do, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of work going on. It is a heavy lift, but just from the meetings that we've had so far, people are very, very invested in this. They are thinking outside the box. They're reading all the materials that have been provided from everything from the CDC to all the some other school districts' plans to some national work that's been done. Everybody's taking it very, very seriously, and I think we're going to come up with some good stuff. So I wanted to just report out that, because, you know, that has to do with facilities, and I know there was just talk about cleaning supplies and all those kind of things. So other than that, I think that I'm open for questions if anybody has anything. I didn't really have any necessarily bond oversight specific anything prepared. We've really been doing most of our work around trying to figure out how to improve the teaching and learning going forward, and working with the superintendent and his team, and you know, trying to figure out what this all means for the district. And so I'm happy to take questions, answer them the best I can, and if I don't know, I will find out, or I have a fabulous staff online as well that can help me. And if we don't know, we'll get back to you. So I'm happy to field questions.
Thank you very much, Trustee Wright. I wanted to just take a minute to say my kids in the schools have really appreciated, at least I as a parent, really appreciated what the school did for a continuing education online during this time. My kids have really actually enjoyed it, and I think it's been beneficial. I would ask a bond question I think would be interesting is whether or not, I don't know if you can tell us what you are foreseeing opening in the fall, but if that would impact our ability to do renovations, because I know that was one of the key problems we've discussed before, is having kids in the school while renovations are going on. Is there any indications of when schools will reopen, or is that something to be decided still much in the future?
Yeah, it really still, sorry, I think I started talking too fast. It really is still up in the air. It's really going to count and hinge on where we are in our phased reopening, and dictated a lot by what the virus is doing and where we are in those phases. You know, if we're I was talking to a principal this morning, and I said it's sort of like we're trying to play darts in the dark and hope we hit a bullseye. You know, hoping we're aiming at the right thing, because we honestly don't know. I mean, at this point, we don't know when phase 2 is going to happen, and so what does that mean, you know, for phase 3 and all these kinds of things. So we're looking at all those options, but I would hope that we would continue to do as much of the renovations as possible, just as we have in the past. I know that we have had some issues, but we've really tried hard to do workarounds, you know, with putting certain places out of scope for kids and fencing them off and doing all kinds of things. So I think our staff will be very creative, and if we have, you know, if we have to adjust midstream and be flexible, I think that's what all of us are going to have to do. This is our reality at this point.
So, and if I may chime in, Trustee Wright, one of the things that she is perfectly correct. I mean, she's right on that we don't have an idea of what it's going to look like. Where it all depends on not only where the virus, but then also what the guidelines from the state, from the CDC, and also from the governor's office. That's number one. So we're planning ABC, what that looks like. I'm going to tell you, I'm on. Yesterday, I was on a call with the Superintendents Association. I'm on a COVID task force with 30 superintendents across the country to learn. Obviously, you have superintendents that are still in school that will finish in June in New York City and New York, to the ones that are already, like we did, finish, and then when do we start? So the conversations across the country, what we have found is that nobody's giving guidance. So AASA and the council agreed to the schools. They're putting all the resources together to try to get the best practices for our schools, right? So that's one of the things that we're worried about. What it looks like, we don't know. We're all over the place. This morning with the council agreed to the schools call, you have folks that may impact not so much construction, but renovations and dollars that we don't have enough money. I mean, you got school districts that are putting practitioners or those windows that are in the Albertsons, if you will, for the main office. There's already, so we're being very careful and cautious because we don't know where that's going to come from the guidance. One of the things that my concern is that they're going to set a set of expectations from the community, meaning our partners in the casinos. They're going to they have a lot more resources than we do, and they're going to put a level of safety as folks are coming in, because obviously they want business in to come in and feel comfortable and safe. That may become the new normal, which will put stress on us, right? So these are things that we're all contemplating and thinking and planning. From a bond perspective, and I know that Jeff and the team had a conversation around, and I want to say this, I'm so proud of the work that the entire administration, the team, our teachers, our principals, we jumped on a distance education to do the best we could with very limited resources in the state. And I say that often, and I can't say it enough, the work that our teachers, our principals, the central office to jump into the work that has been accomplished has been clear, almost, we've made mistakes, but it's been spotless. It's been phenomenal on behalf of kids. We haven't invested in technology, obviously in new schools in Bond, right? Distance education, there's gotta be Wi-Fi connectivity. It's gotta be infrastructure. We have schools that don't have that. So when you look at the state level requesting, well, it's more than just giving devices to kids. It's more because then there's no internet connectivity at home, right? So then there's not even a hotspot in schools for every child. So we are going to be putting, and I know that the bond dollars on technology come, and Jeff very eloquently mentioned that in cabinet. That's towards the tail end of this bond, right? Of these 10 years. So does that need to move up? We don't know. We have to, so all of that stuff now, this new normal, there's some calculation, and we all know what the dollars are that we don't have to maintain our facilities. So I think this is we're going to put all of that together, and that's going to come to this bond oversight.
Okay, I have to step in here and actually say something, because quite frankly, what he's talking about is real. They do need to look at the bond oversight committee and see what the bond is doing, actually, But when it comes to the intent and the purpose behind public school system, then we need to understand that we need to have an expectation for the school system. And if the city has to organize, and I just want to know what the partnership is with the county, with the city, and with the state, and with the school district to ensure that internet access happens, because each one of these agencies has funding to build a unique, network in which the community can access it. It just amazes me that one little person or one agency is worried about their input of what they have to join in. And as you can see, we have the Black Caucus in the room with Yvette Williams. And I can't have a conversation with her yet, as she has been appointed. And see, these appointments of people who don't engage with the community is an issue, because they're representing the community, yet and still they don't engage with the community. Let me start the video back up.
Because there's, and I say this, the board knows, I mean, when I was in Orlando, it took us 6 years to go to a digital one-to-one, right? 6 years, and $240 million invested in technology, and that's not including professional development. We are trying to do with very little resources from the state that wasn't. So it's not a criticism of this team not doing it and this entire team and the board. It's been the lack of resources. that we haven't invested in our children. And you know the communities that are going to suffer the worst, because that's where the lack of connectivity, that's where the lack of support. So I wanted this body to understand that there's some things that we're going to look, and I have full confidence in Jeff and Rodney and the team. But now, if we go to a blended, do we then move bond oversight money? I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'm posing the question to serve the needs of our families and serve the needs of our community. Do we then start moving on some of these technology when we have essential operational costs to maintain the AC, the HVAC? So it's just compounding the challenges.
So all of the challenges in educating community really have to do with the coordination of the community and the services provided by the county or the city or the state. And then when we look at an entertainment capital of the world like Nevada, why are we not partnering with the business community to ensure that access and resource happens for the children that you want to educate to work in your community? I mean, when there's zero accountability, we're really looking at zero accountability. And there's been no maintenance of effort, and we're not talking about data, but we are talking about bond money. Bond money is, money that comes from a bond that was written and, implemented to help provide additional resources to the whole system, I believe. And so, but when we're not talking about the maintenance of effort for all of it, how do you part out and piecemeal, different programs and agencies that you want to fund with the federal dollars have no coordination with the outcomes, and the outcomes are really speaking to me today. Let's continue, shall we?
All right, well, thank you, Trustee. Did you have anything else to add, Trustee, or can I open up for questions again?
No, I think I'm happy to open it up for questions. And again, if somebody ever, has a question between meetings, I'm happy to have them shoot me an email, and I can find out from staff or, have a dialogue with them. So.
Great. So is there anybody who has a question for Trustee Wright on this agenda item? We're talking about agenda item 303, her report.
Yes, Walter Jones. Good evening, Trustee Wright. How you doing?
Hi, good.
Do we never got a date on when the schools are going to open back up? And I also want to know, with schools being closed since February, how much funds have been saved because we have low power bills. That means we haven't been paying for fuel for buses because they haven't been on the road. We have substitutes, so that's the money we have saved. So do we know how much has been saved? So I know it's not a number right off.
Okay, how exciting that he can say. We have substitutes who are not getting paid the same amount of money as a regular, teacher. And believe me, all that is calculated in when they design the schools about the cost of the staff. But when you have seasoned staff, of course, they cost much more. And when you have temporary staff, of course, that costs you much less. And so I'm finding that in Nevada, in the schools that have program improvement necessities, where there's a lot of children with poverty needs, well, they have a lot of unpermanent staff, temporary staff. And so they're not paying all those lump sums, but then in programs where they're located in the area of high poverty, which means the Head Start Center or charter school located in the neighborhood, well, they just don't have those same level of children who have those high needs. And they have created processes in which you can exclude people or include people. So we're really not talking about the base data. I just want to know, base data-wise, what is the district doing to ensure that all children have access? And you need to be able to demonstrate that in how you're utilizing the funds. And if you get bond money and you get additional money donated to the district, well, then you need to talk about how you're going to allocate those funds to ensure that equity happens. We're not talking about equity. We're not even talking about access. We're not talking about data because we're not talking about outcomes. But we are talking about spending money. So shall we continue to listen?
Off the bat, but do we know how much we have so we can find ways so we can move that around?
So, Walter, we actually discussed that exact thing with the savings in our Monday night budget meeting. And so most of our savings is going to be coming from fuel because we haven't been busing kids around. But we don't have an exact number, but with a budget deficit.
Okay, so she said most of the savings is coming from busing children, and they don't have to bus them anymore. But when they were busing those children and where they were busing them to, and what was the maintenance of effort on those children who were getting bused around? Because we need to understand the relevance and the numbers of the children who are being bused and the intent behind busing. That's real. So shall we continue to listen?
Any money that had been saved is going to go to try and lessen that budget deficit. So, you know, it's not going to be something that we're going to have this pool of extra money.
And so let's talk about the budget deficit and what she's saying the money's going to go towards. Because, you know, where they were working people, basically where they didn't qualify to work, like in those programs, like magnet programs in the high poverty neighborhoods, but they had the best teachers in the best program. So in schools like Zoom and Victory schools, there's money allocated and they were doing very well. And then you have the charter schools, I'm sure they were doing very well. But it's just the schools that are not targeted for additional support, but targeted under access of the number of poverty children. But then when you don't spend the money, well, that's what May Revise is for. So here we are in May, and they're getting ready to revise and disperse the money that had already been dispersed. But quite frankly, it didn't know justice. It served no purpose, no intent to what? The success of those students, because we're not measuring that, no data.
So yeah, there is never any extra money in the Clark County School District. Yeah, so when we're looking at it, we're looking at taking any of those cost savings that have been realized because of the fact that we have not been moving kids around. Now, the reality is we still have had to have electricity and things in our buildings because most of our HVAC systems are so old, and the reality is if we were to shut them down, we might not be able to get them to turn back on. So we can't just shut buildings down. So most of our buildings have been technically up and running as far as that goes. But our budget team is specifically looking at taking those savings dollars to offset what little bit we can for the budget reductions, or the deficit that we're going to have. The date about opening schools, we honestly don't know. We don't know what again, we're playing darts in the dark. We don't know what the guidelines from the CDC are going to be come August. We don't know where we're going to be in the phase. Are we still going to be in phase 1? Are we going to be in phase 2? Will we have moved to phase 3? We don't know what the direction from, our health department is going to be. I mean, there's so many unknowns. And so that's why we're looking sort of at plan A, plan B, plan C. I think that we would all really like to at least hope really strongly for some sort of soft start in August, whether that means fully an online start at the beginning and then bringing kids back into buildings a little later as we get more information. But I don't know, to be honest. We just do not have that information yet.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Wright.
And as far as fuel, we've saved approximately around $2 million in fuel for buses not running. My KC is sharing that with me. So that's around 2 million. But I want Walter, if I may, the department they're trying to balance at the state level current budget, and we don't have that number yet. So they're still trying to find out at the state how we pay the bills by the end of June 30th.
Yeah, we're still looking at possibly cuts for the year we're in, and we don't know what that even looks like. So it's a little scary.
Thank you, Dr. Jar.
Aaron, you have something?
Yeah, Trustee Wright, Dr. Jara, how are you? Hope you guys are being safe. Byron Goins. You mentioned the long distance learning and the fact that our new normal is going to be wrapped around some type of technology to keep these kids connected to their education and reaching their goals. Dr. Jara, you mentioned that you hit the nail right on the head. We know which neighborhoods are going to be impacted, and we know what those kids look like that are going to be impacted. If we do get enough money to wrap technology around that, is that population at the top of the list, or are they at the middle or the bottom when this money gets handed out? Because I'd hate to see it go uptown when it really needs to be downtown.
It's a priority, and that's a great question. And if I may, Trustee Wright, answer that, that is a priority of mine. That's what on Saturdays we.
Okay, so finally, we're having a conversation that we should have been having all along. The reality is that we, the people, are held accountable for the outcomes of the outcomes or the lack of outcomes in the community. And you know, how they utilize the money and what they're using the money for is critical. How to measure the maintenance of effort, and what is maintenance of effort. Let me just break it down to you. When you have a child in the first grade, they're expected to learn some certain things. But if they don't learn them by the first grade, then they're moved to the second grade. And however, what they didn't learn is what they still get penalized on. So we have to understand that life is about test completion. But if they're in the third grade and they can't read and comprehend, well, guess what? No one goes back to catch them up. And here we are living in 2020, and we have so many children who drop out of school in Clark County, and where there's just no maintenance of effort. And well, by the way, just can you tell me who is monitoring the lack of outcomes in the public system? Because quite frankly, we spend a lot of money in education, but we lack the outcomes. Let's continue, shall we?
We've been delivering Chromebooks in our communities where we haven't seen the number of students receiving Chromebooks. So that is a priority. We were at El Dorado, we were at Canyon Springs last 2 weekends ago. This weekend we went to all the apartments and single suites all around the downtown community. We're going to continue doing that throughout the summer, because that is the priority for me, because that's where we have not only our learning loss, that's where we have our huge gaps and the lack of access. So it is a priority, and I know it's also a priority of the board.
So thank you very much.
And Byron, I'm going to jump in and just say that I personally would say we have to start in those neighborhoods where we know that connectivity is consistently and historically an issue. And
Yeah.
So what happens with the partnerships with the city, with the state, and with the county? Because there should be a partnership that the public school system is in partnership with the county, the city, and the state, and the local government. Come on now. Why is it that we don't have connectivity? I'll say the word connectivity to the internet access. And then we have the gaming capital of the world, and we know what kind of data is flying around in the casinos, right? But why is it's not benefiting? And why is it that they're not putting in more to ensure that technology happens? Because we live in a knowledge-rich society, meaning that if you understand your responsibility to learn and to become a lifetime learner, well, you just simply benefit. And that's what I say. So what are we saying? Now, let's continue.
we've got to get hotspots and whatever we can do to beef up in those areas, because you know it's an equity issue. and so we have to start with that core inside area and get those people connected and get those people online, so to speak, those families, that community. And then we've also got to, and this is part of the work we're doing, provide some professional development, if we could call it that, to parents to help them so they know how to help their kids with how you connect a document to something to turn it in Google, Classroom. How do they do these things? Because, parents do want to help. Parents are not totally disengaged. It's just that they don't know what to do to help. So we're also looking at the component of what can we do to provide support to parents who have never really had this connectivity before, to kind of walk them through the steps of, these are some of the things that you can do as a parent to help your kid, your student, be really successful at this online learning. So
Excellent. So yeah, was really right. Those neighborhoods need those hot spots as well. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Quick question. Debbie, you're on.
A second. Patty, you had a question, and then Debbie, and then Yvette also has a question.
Yeah, I'm good. I just really wanted to thank Trustee Wright and Superintendent Jara for providing some of that context regarding the reopening. I know I put a comment in the chat specifically around it was good to have that reminder again about the maintenance of effort. That's really, really important as we're looking at federal funding and what some of those restraints can look like. And I'll save my next comment for the end on postings, because I think we need a lot more conversation, specifically as the plan to reopen occurs, so that we can assist in supporting those efforts as we move forward. But just wanted to thank them both. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Debbie, and then Yvette.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I worked with some nieces and nephews, and I know there was great efforts that went out, but I know that there are areas where, regardless of providing a Chromebook, of providing professional responsibility, it's not going to happen.
Really?
Is there some thoughts about just creating some?
Oh, darn. So she's saying there are some people in the public school system that are just not learning, and it's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter if they have a Chromebook or not. So let's just talk about that concept for a minute, shall we?
Hard copies and some packets that can be delivered. Because I know there were schools that parents would.
Okay, packets. You know what packets are? Dittos. You know what dittos do? Absolutely nothing. Because guess what? If you give a child a ditto, someone else could do the ditto, quite frankly, for them. But it doesn't demonstrate their actual learning that they're having in the classroom. And see, what we never got, what was taking place in the classroom, an honest look at how many children weren't learning, and what could we actually do to ensure that we're engaging more children. Now, she's going to come up and say that the digital concept just is not going to work. We have to have packets. Are you serious? Are you serious?
Would actually go and pick up packets and turn in packets. And I know that it's so much easier online, but I think that has to be part of the component, that no matter how much training and whatnot, it's just not going to get there. There's people that just need those hard copies. And I think that's something to consider.
Yeah, we have talked about that. And, again, we're kind of at the beginning of this fast and furious work with this reopening group.
Okay, fast and furious work. We are talking about just what has been the maintenance of effort, just where are all the children scoring, especially in the higher poverty schools, and what's being done, and how do we measure that? Because see, the board members in May of last year voted that they would rescind their responsibility to work with the data and the superintendent. And I was stunned by that. I mean, I was actually stunned, because that's their only job, is to measure the maintenance of effort on how we're using the federal allocation to ensure that those children down there who normally don't have enough money actually qualify for a level of benefits. And we hold ourselves accountable. But that level of accountability does not exist in Nevada. So shall we continue?
Subgroup is secondary and blended learning. But there's, like I said, I think there's 5 different work groups, and I know that this is a topic of discussion. But I believe that there's going to be, just like now with registration, we still do have some things, you know, where people can come online, you know, hard copy. There's always going to unfortunately have to be some hard copy. So I'll put that in my notes today, in fact, for the group, just as a reminder that we're always going to have a little bit of a population that needs that paper in hand. So
I just want to follow up. As a former teacher, there's always excuses. I can't get online. You never know how much of those are accurate or whatnot, but there's no excuse if there's been a hard copy packet that's been delivered to the child for them to complete. This is just some thoughts.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We had hard copies in our food delivery, in our food distribution centers. We did. And actually, we're going to continue feeding our families through July 31st. We got approval from the USDA, and we're going to continue on the hard copies as well throughout July, and hopefully, you know, obviously continue that process.
Okay, I have Yvette, and then Walter, did you have a question after Yvette?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yvette, then Walter. Thank you.
Thank you. In regards to access for the Chromebook, with the technology piece that the Bond Oversight Committee, the funding from sources such as the CARES Act here and so forth, here specifically for the Chromebooks, and the money was specifically to go to those gaps where kids don't have access, to make sure that everyone has access. And then going to the point, I want to just reiterate what Deb said, because a lot of grandmothers and aunties and stuff like that are raising extended family. And I know a lot of seniors, I help many of our members who are seniors because they can't really do all of this. I'm trying to have a meeting like this is very complicated. They'll call in on the phone maybe, but not necessarily. So I think we really have to prioritize the discussion around how do we make sure that kids are learning from a distance without a computer. And I really think.
Okay, now isn't that interesting? She wants to focus on children learning without a computer. And I want to focus on what the data actually said and how I want a demonstration as to how children are learning in the classroom. And you know, it's not about the computer, but it is about the level of engagement. And what this pandemic has truly identified is that certain children were not being engaged. And it doesn't matter about a ditto packet. What it matters is that the student can do the work. And they're measuring the maintenance of effort, and that they can document, oh Lord, how the money is being used. So I should calm down, because I'm not trying to make it any deal of everyone or anyone, but the actual understanding that all these years I have volunteered in the maintenance of effort, basically, and the participation of community and parent understanding or engagement of the process, and understood the level of what people actually have to do and to ensure that their children are making a progress. But when I look back and I recall, I was the only one in the room at the board meetings. I'd be the only one in the room at the table at the school site. And how I got the information back to other parents was just strictly based on my relationship, because quite frankly, the majority of the data was never publicized. But when we're living in a county or a community in which they don't document as to how they're spending that money, and everybody feels that they're so entitled to the job. Well, COVID-19 demonstrated that no one is entitled to the job, and that outcomes are very critical. And that if you take money, you must provide the documentation that you're utilizing the money correctly and that you're making a difference in the lives of many. So when we look at the people who are making the difference in the lives of many understand so many are being burdened by the lack of access, by the lack of knowledge for so many years. How many years? At least 12 in the public education system. But if you don't get the basic understanding of what you need to do is to learn how to follow through, actively engage in the process, and participate to ensure that your children are making a benefit, then you're zero yourself out, irrelevant. We all have to live a life of relevancy. We all have a personal responsibility to grow up and to understand that the price of freedom has never been free. And the engagement and the opportunity to engage and be a part of the system is real. So when Black people or formerly enslaved people from the inherited, they inherited basically how you've come up. I can't even think of the word right now. I won't even bother to think about it. But the real deal is that we all must be relevant. Now, relevancy means that you're engaged in the process, but it also means that you participate in the process, that you've given up something, a sacrifice, or something. You've had to participate to ensure that all the services are relevant and that you can manage or that you can measure or that you can have a conversation about the outcomes. And see, that's what parent involvement really is about. We're about assessing our children to determine if they're making adequate progress to ensure that they have adequacy when they leave your under your nurturing, your nurturing environment, basically your space, and your children are out in the community. Do they possess basic level skills in which to get a job, in which to open a bank account, in which to basically be a relevant taxpayer? And it's not going to be based on their gifts, because we know that some people were born gifted, and the intent behind that is just to share. But for people who are disciplined and understand the process and participate in the process, it is critical that we share the level of understanding that we realize in our lifetime that is relevant to success. So let's continue, shall we? Because I just walked out of the room for a moment, but I know that I've tried to communicate with Ms. Yvette Williams, and she's the caucus, and I actually paid my membership money for the Black Caucus, and I got a few for the membership money, which is, I know is now due again, but that I paid. I got a few notices in which I could participate and come to election events, like when Cory Booker was here, or, depending on whoever is in leadership in this caucus thing, on what they were sharing with everybody. And basically they just wanted you to show up. They never wanted to hear what you had to say. So that's it. Because some people who live in areas believe that the area belongs to them. But some people who live in America believe that America belongs to them. And the access and responsibility to ensure that access happens nationwide lays on our personal backs individually. Because holding local communities accountable, which will ensure that you send great representation to the state level of representation to ensure that you're represented. But if you don't choose to participate, understand that contracts and contractors are getting public monies to sustain their families, and it ain't you because you're not participating. Well, hell, when was the election, or when is the election, or who's running for office, or who is looking out to ensure that your children are benefiting? And so when we look at the baseline data, I'm so confused as to the intent behind public education. And when I asked a question about how they're educating the children in juvenile facilities or juvenile detention, as they have 80% population of people who look like me, and they provide no information, just no information, that they feel that they don't have an obligation to it. But I'm here to say that they're wrong. So let's listen up. I'm not trying to make an enemy of any one person. I'm just saying that my life has pushed me down a journey in which I understand data, and I understand what it looks like when people are benefiting, and I understand what it looks like when people are not. And when people are not benefiting, you have a crazy number of willful defiance issues, like a 259% suspension expulsion rate. in one county that has the 6th largest number of children in the population of largest school districts. We're the 6th or the 5th or whatever. But I will say, no matter where we are, all children have a right to benefit. So shall we continue to listen?
That we need to really, really focus on that more than, we are, because it is a bigger problem. And but then outside of that, I wanted to ask a question around Chromebooks, getting back to Chromebooks and internet, because there are problems with Cox, being able to get Cox. There's a lot of other rules and restrictions that prevent families from being able to subscribe to Cox, even at the $10 a month, which we don't know how long that's going to last. Has there been any conversation, Dr. Jara, around any kind of negotiated contract, or I've even suggested with NDE that maybe it's something the governor takes on to negotiate some kind of flat rate or whatever, so that we can make sure that our families, especially in these neighborhoods, have that access. And then secondly, do we have a number of how many kids are still without Chromebooks?
So, Superintendent Jar, for the record, one of the things that I know that negotiations and conversations with Cox Communications to continue extending the free within 2 months, and we're continuing that discussion, not about the district investing and paying families, because I'm going to tell you, we can't afford that. Now we are partnering, part of the Council of Great City Schools and Dallas Independent School District. Dr.
All right, so let's talk about what he just said. They want to have your child and get the benefit of your child being enrolled in their services. And then they want to have to be responsible as to how your child will actually access those services. So I'm a little confused in regards to when we look at the intent and understand that we are paying salaries, a lot of salaries, for children who are not making any benefit and who actually are spending a lot of time in correctional facilities as to they are not at a basic level of education. And that's just real. So I'm confused why in 2020, then we have so many people who figure that nationally, it doesn't matter if you get a basic education. When we understand locally how that affects individuals. And so shall we continue to listen? I just have to pray about understanding what's being said in the room and how people feel that they have no obligation. They have no obligation that you benefit for what the offer of a free and appropriate public education looks like. Because it doesn't look like a data collection base of all the things that you cannot do. So shall we continue?
Hinojosa has been leading the effort nationally to really put pressure on the FCC to do that. Internet is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And we are partnering with the council to really put pressure nationally on FCC. And I did have a conversation with the state superintendent for public instruction around that here in Nevada, because I told her that I said that the governor needs to be, really addressing that issue statewide, because we do have in our community, in our urbans, but our rural communities and also rural Nevada is also the connectivity is an issue for our families. So that's kind of that answer there. As far as the Chromebooks that we have, we've been distributing, and I'll tell you, last Saturday we put it out there, and we only distributed 78 Chromebooks.
Oh Lord! So they put it out there, and they only distributed 78 Chromebooks. So where were the rest of the families? Were they just not in communication with the families? Did they just not have a relationship with the families? Who are these people who just are not getting it, that education is not going to go back to the classroom? And you're not going to have the break of someone watching your children while you're making a living. We're going to have to look at things so much more differently, because the COVID virus is just not going away. And if you'd like to sit back and plan on, on the service is returning, I would suggest you read a book called Who Moved the Cheese? And I'm going to bring the book to you so you can see it, because things are not going to be going back the way they used to.
All day, Saturday, families are not coming, so we went to them. So we're pinning down the numbers to see where we are, so we continue and be more strategic to get it out. You know, so we have some families that if they're using their own and they're not coming. So we've distributed about 109,000 Chromebooks, but we still have an inventory in our schools. We're pinning down that number to see who doesn't have one that we can get to them. So we don't have that number, but we're working to get there.
I have some other questions, but I'll wait until I talk with you later, Superintendent, on that.
Yep.
This is Rodney Fouts for the record. I just wanted to go back to a previous item you brought up. In our state forms, our estimated actual for expenditures for 2020 is just under 2.4 billion. Our amended final budget for 2020 was 2.476 billion. So you're looking at about a $76 million savings compared to our plan and what our actual estimated 2020 is coming out to be. So that might give you somewhat of an idea of what we're saving.
Mr. Fouts, just real quick, is that a general budget item, or is that
General operating
specific?
fund. It's
Okay.
a general operating fund total expenditures. And that includes the general operating fund and our special education fund.
Thank you. Mr. Jones. your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Yeah, I like the question that Mr. Bourne brought in, Ms. Williams and the other young lady, because the problem that we have, 89106, some of 89030 in other areas in District C is hurting because most of the families got to make a decision between, do I buy food or do I pay for cable? So we know that food is going to come first. So a lot of the stuff, and then we also have, and I like what you said too, Trustee Wright, but we also got to make sure, I have constituents that came to me that don't even know how to work the Chromebooks. They don't know how to help their kids with the Chromebooks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should look into try to at least do something with the Boys and Girls Club in different areas where we can have satellite stuff for the summer, because some of these kids do need to be in school, because we got, let's be real, when this epidemic hit, nobody knew about it. These kids took their summer February the 18th. So when school was shut down, that's when these summer started. So now we're talking about almost, before anything gets started, we're talking about 7 months of school that they've been out of a motor building. So I think it's something that we should look into, of doing something with the Boys and Girls Club in certain areas, especially over here in District C, and also.
Okay. You know, when you start talking about third-party providers and the work that they're doing, understand that they're really not doing the work that the agency should be responsible for. So here's this little book. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know, but maybe I have to put it in the mirror. And so like this. How can I put it where you can see it? I don't know if you can, but it really is. Who Moved My Cheese? And the author is Spencer Johnson. He is a medical MD, basically. And you know, it really goes to what's happening for our people and how our people are reacting. I'm going to read a little part in this book. It says, every day the mice and little people spent time in the maze looking for their own special cheese. The mice sniffed and scurried, possessing simple brains and good instincts, and scratching and searched for hard nibbling cheese like they liked, as the mouse often do. The two little people, him and Haw, used their complex brains filled with many beliefs and emotions to search for a very different kind of cheese with a capital C, which they believed would make them feel happy and successful. As different as mice and little people were. They shared something in common. Every morning, they would each put their jogging suits on and running shoes on, and left for their little homes to race out into the maze, looking for their favorite cheese. The maze was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, and some containing delicious cheese. But there were also dark corners and behind blind alleys leading to nowhere. It was an easy place for everyone to get lost. However, for those who found their way, the maze held secrets that let them enjoy a better life. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, used a simple trial and error method of finding the cheese. They ran down one corridor, and if it proved to be empty, then they turned and ran down the other way. They remembered that the corridors that held no cheese and quickly went into the new areas. Sniff would smell out the general direction of the cheese using his great nose, and Scurry would race ahead. They got lost, and you might expect in the wrong direction, were bumped off into walls. But after a while, they found their way. Like the mice and the two little people, Him and Ha, also used their ability to think and learn from their past experiences. However, they relied on the complex brains to develop more sophisticated methods of finding cheese. Sometimes they did well, but at other times, their powerful humans' beliefs and emotions took over and clouded their way. So the way they looked at things. It may be life in the maze more complicated and challenging. Nonetheless, Sniff and Scurry and Him and Ha all looking for. They each found their own cheese one day, and at the end of the corridor in cheese station C, every morning after that, the mice and little people dressed up in their running gear and headed out over to cheese station C. It wasn't long before they established their own routine. Sniff and Scurry would continue to wake up early every morning, every day, and race through the maze, always following the same route. When they arrived at their destination, the mice took off their running shoes and tied them together and hung them around their necks so that they could get to them quickly. However, they needed again. Whenever they were needed again. Then they enjoyed the cheese. In the beginning, Him and Ha also raced towards the cheese station C every morning, enjoying the new tasty cheese morsels that awaited them. But after a while, a different routine set in for little people. Him and Ha woke up each day and dressed in a little shower and a walk to the cheese station C. After a while, they knew where the cheese was and how they were going to get there. They had no idea that the cheese came from whoever put it there. They just assumed that it would be there. And as soon as Him and Ha arrived at cheese station C each morning, they settled in and made themselves a home. They hung up their jogging slippers and they were becoming very comfortable. Now that they had found some cheese. This was great. Him and Ha said, "There's enough cheese here to last forever." And the little people felt happy and successful. And the thought that they were secure. And how it wasn't long before Him and Ha reached the cheese that they had found in the cheese station C and their cheese, whatever. It was such a large store of cheese that eventually they moved their homes to be closer and built a social life around that cheese station. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying that we have built lives around the public and free education. And every day we expected to get something out of it. And every day it was the same. But each and every day, a little more and a little more was taken away. And pretty soon there was nothing left. So I look at this book, was the #1 bestseller. Let me think, I don't even know when it was published. Let me see if it has a publishing date. But it was such a great book, and I enjoyed it tremendously. My sister would read to me, and we would take turns reading this book, because, you know, reading is just not my thing. I think reading is fundamental, but if you don't read, you can't be knowledgeable. So we all need to understand that reading is fundamental. And how we share ideals and concepts are through books and movies, and now little mini videos. So in looking at the outcomes from the public school system and understanding the intent behind local, state, and community funding, and the misnomer that we all are not entitled to outcomes, data. This is how we exist. You need to demonstrate the model of maintenance of effort and understand that maintenance of effort is real. What are you doing to ensure that you get those outcomes? Shall we continue?
Over in Henderson, because those are going to be the worst hit areas when it comes down to education.
Yeah. So I believe I'm not sure the exact date, but it has been since mid-March that we've been out, and we do know that there's a significant portion of the population that even if we put a Chromebook in their hand, they're going to have a really hard time because they just...
Oh my goodness, because you have not demanded the maintenance of effort. You just don't know what's happening in those schools. And so therefore you have nothing to ask the principals because they've not provided any of that information. But in order to maintain your district level services, then you have to be coming with more to the table. And we need to understand that you don't have anything at the table right now, but I'm waiting for you to deliver the data.
Just are not tech savvy, they're not comfortable with technology, you know, all those kinds of things. And so, again, those are talked about a lot in these working groups. And I'm hoping that when we come out the other end, we have some but ifs to address those situations. You know, with the overarching for the district that this is the expectation, but knowing that there's always going to be some exceptions and that we have to plan for those exceptions and make things available. So.
Thank you, Trustee Wright.
Thanks.
I was gonna.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna add just one thing. I don't know if I'm understanding. Some of the concern seems to be just a connection issue. I know that AT&T has been out there promoting this 25% off for medical on their bill, medical people. My wife is involved in the medical field, and so we got that discount, but frankly, we did not need it so much, as I think it would be very helpful. Has anybody reached out to AT&T or to Cox about a general Wi-Fi for the school district use? Or anybody like somebody who already has hotspots all over the city.
We also
ability is theoretically, does Cox or AT&T, or are there already resources out there that could provide Wi-Fi for all the students in Clark County, or at least for these urban areas that we're discussing today?
So, Dr. Jara, I think some of there are some areas that the homes and the buildings are just, you know, they're not available to do the wiring, right? So they would have to bring in like towers or give hotspots or do something. That's one of the things we've come up against, and that's kind of why the buses were deployed, because there's some areas that there's just these pockets that, even though they're kind of broadcasting, that nothing is getting out to these areas. There's no connectivity. And then there seems to be a little bit of disjointedness, because what Cox had kind of told me specifically on the phone was like they were going to waive if you had had a previous bill that maybe you didn't pay, and so you were, discontinued service with Cox and all this kind of stuff, that they were waiving all of that. But yet the other day in this reopening meeting, that I'm hearing from principals that is completely not true. When parents call to try and get reconnected for their kids to do the $10 a month, that if they have a prior balance or were disconnected for some reason or have a past bill, that Cox will not reconnect them. So part of what I wanted to do in these next few days was reach out to the person that Dr. Jara and I have both talked to with Cox to get some clarification, because we're being told one thing, and then down the line, the customer service agent is telling a parent something else. And so I think there's more work that can be done, but there's just some real challenges in areas that are just really hard to get to. So Dr. Jara, I'll let you take over.
No, thank you, Trustee Wright. One of the things in the data that we have, and absolutely right, that we're looking at nationally, and I'm sure you're aware, may not know, city of Las Vegas, which, it's in the top 100 worst cities with connectivity across the country. So that's an issue. That's part of why this is a bigger issue with the state leadership, and then also with FCC.
I'm just going to put this out there. Has anybody talked to Switch Las Vegas about this problem? Because they've mentioned to me they're looking at doing some kind of charitable project, and providing connectivity is something about what they do. They may be interested in being involved in a project like this. Has anybody talked to them?
That's a good one. Probably not. I don't know if Jeff, but it's a good somebody we can reach out to. I don't know if Jeff, anybody's had conversations with Switch.
I haven't lately, but I will get on the phone soon.
Do you have a contact over there, Trustee Wright, or you want me to help with that at all?
You know what? I don't know if my contact is still there, so I would love if you would help connect me with someone. That'd be great.
You have you can contact me, and I can put you in contact with them. I think this is something they'd be interested in, especially if there were specific zip codes we were trying to get Wi-Fi connection to you. That might be something doable. So.
Okay. Thanks, Jacob.
I didn't see anybody else raising hands. Is there anybody else who has anything on this item? Back to Trustee Wright's liaison. This is expanded a bit, but I think it's appropriate for what the question was. For what I think the conversation was appropriate. Was there anybody else who had a question for Trustee Wright? Okay, well, we'll move on. Thank you so much, Trustee Wright, and thank you so much, Mr. Jara. Moving on to 3.05, Comprehensive Renovation Program.
Thank you, Jacob. Board office is there. Can you put up the presentation, please? So this is a presentation that we were originally prepared to bring to you earlier this year. It is a follow-up on the information about our comprehensive renovation plan. So the Board of School Trustees in Revision 4 to the 2015 Capital Improvement Plan approved our new approach to renovation projects, as opposed to only fixing certain systems within a school. They've approved us going into a school, doing a comprehensive analysis, and fixing everything at that particular campus before we move on to another campus. So with that, we looked at the, using the FCI index as a guide, looked at the 3 worst schools by category. So 1 elementary school, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. And we're bringing back that information today with our recommendations and how we intend on proceeding on those 3 campuses. Next slide, please. So in the comprehensive renovation program, our goal was to really approach the school holistically rather than piece by piece. So heretofore, our strategy has been to replace systems that were deemed central and could shut down instruction. For example, a leaky roof, a non-operational HVAC system, major catastrophe to a plumbing system, things of that nature. And that's worked relatively well for us, but we go into a school and we do that work. For example, at Bonanza, which we'll talk about here shortly, we went in and spent $11.8 million on the roof and the HVAC system, only to have a school that still needed a significant amount of work done to bring it to current standard. So in this process, we've taken a deeper dive into each building and looked at all the systems, everything from the emergency management system to control system to flooring, paint, plumbing fixtures, to really bring that campus to current standards. Next slide, please. So the first of the 3 schools we'll start with is Bonanza High School. Following the previous projects that have been done there, we invested approximately $11.8 million. That addressed the roof in the HVAC system. As you can tell from the pictures here, the interior of the school was not touched. And in looking back at what was still left to be done there, the fire and life safety system has triggered over 60 times this school year. Obviously, that has a direct impact on instructional time. We don't find that to be an acceptable situation. And we've had, next slide, please. Had a number of work orders, hundreds of work orders at that school. So the current FCI as calculated is 0.32, meaning the cost to bring the building to current standard would be approximately 32% of the cost to replace the entire building. The 5-year FCI shows that increasing to 0.45 or 45%. Our recommendation is at this school and all schools that are older that we get in front of this curve. We make these renovations in time to salvage the building and put it to its best use. But we're recommending that we move forward and invest $57 million to modernize Bonanza. Let me rephrase that. My staff has recommended to me, and I've accepted the recommendation that we move forward with $54 million investment at Bonanza. Next slide, please. So Von Tobel Middle School is our middle school. Has the highest FCI index at the moment. It's also probably the truest candidate for the comprehensive renovation. So we haven't done a tremendous amount of work at this campus. However, there's a tremendous need. We have HVAC issues that are reoccurring. We've had 284 work orders from August to February. Again, that's multiple work orders every single day that those students are in class. I can tell you the principal of this school spends an enormous amount of time addressing work orders that takes away from him being able to coach his staff and address the learning of the students. We have an excessive amount of portables. Our security camera system at this campus is poor, to say the least. We also, as we do at many older campuses, have multiple entry points. So we'll be addressing concerns like that through this renovation project that we're bringing forward. Next slide, please. We see this school was originally built in 1955. It has a current FCI of 0.55 or 55%. That is borderline replacement. So if we hit 0.6, we start to have it meets our current criteria for a replacement school. Now, we feel that these schools are good candidates to actually bring up to current standard and not have to do that replacement. A brand new middle school runs us approximately $85 million all in. We feel that at this school, we can invest approximately $30 million and bring that to current standard, as well as set a precedent for the round middle schools. We have many of this particular prototype that will need work here in the recent, not too distant future. So what we're bringing forward today is our plan to invest $30 million at that campus. Next slide, please. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, and most of you are familiar with Red Rock Elementary School, we had a bond oversight meeting there recently and walked that campus. Obviously, this school has a number of issues, HVAC being at the top of the list, hundreds of work orders submitted, plumbing fails on a regular basis. The grounds are non-existent at this point. Next slide. However, it poses a different scenario than Von Tobel. We currently have 744 students enrolled at this campus, which represents 129% of capacity. On the slide in front of you, you can see that there's currently 16 portables and actually plans to add more portables to this campus. A renovation of the physical building does not address our capacity issue at this campus. And so my team and I have looked at the need at that particular campus, not only from the physical plant, but also from a use standpoint. How do we use this campus? And have determined that a renovation of this particular campus is not in the best interest of the school district. We're recommending that when funds are available, this campus is a candidate for replacement. Next slide, please. And you can see that based on our predictive factors, the 5-year FCI for this will be 0.6. FCI is kind of a flawed method of working with these campuses because it doesn't always take into account the fact that that renovating the building won't actually address our needs from a capacity standpoint. So we're working internally to offer some revisions to how we calculate FCI to better capture our actual use of the buildings. Next slide, please. So that concludes our presentation for those 3 campuses. Obviously, our intent is to move forward with this type of analysis on all of our campuses to best determine how we allocate bond funds in these renovation projects. I'll be happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Walter Jones. Jeff?
Hi, Walter.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, I know we had discussed this before. What is the years use that we're getting out the average school? Is it 30 years or 40 years?
Our ed spec calls for us to design a 50-year building. Many of our campuses exceed that 50-year.
So if we go back,
yeah. I think that they were questioning the one time I watched this board meeting, the maintenance of effort in the older schools and what was going on. And they were trying to explain that, you know, they needed to look at the bigger picture of the partnership with the city and where they were putting new schools. And I think that we still have to ensure that all kids have actual access to the public school system. Shall we listen?
That 50-year, no, sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff.
That 50-year building does anticipate that we're going to do major renovations every 25 years or so. And we have failed to do that.
Okay, so let's start like with Von Tobel. Von Tobel was built back in 1955.
Yep.
So from let's say the 30 years, so that would have put us in 85.
Yep.
Okay, so from 85 to now, how much have we spent on Von Tobel on repairs?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, Mr. Jones, but I'll be happy to pull that data and send it to you.
Okay, then let's go to Red Rock. Same scenario. So if we see we got these schools, they're going past their times, and then if we see we spend more on repairs, then it should have been a time when we should have just went in and replaced the school Because now you turn around, we paying 3 times for something we could have paid 1 time, if that makes sense.
I completely concur. That's precisely the reason we brought forward a comprehensive renovation program.
So I guess what I'm saying is some of these schools, we could address it sooner, if I'm correct. Because I know we had spoke before about, we know we're having a big issue with the HVACs in some of the older schools and boilers. So that was just my question. Thanks, Jeff.
So to expand on that, Mr. Jones, the plan here is really to set up a comprehensive plan for how we deal with facilities moving forward, and comprehensive renovation at the appropriate intervals is part of that plan. So structurally, we can get 100 years out of a building very easily. The systems within a building have different lifespans. For example, a HVAC system, we expect to get 20 to 25 years out of if properly maintained.
Right.
So we are looking at a comprehensive plan to understand exactly where we're at today, but also what do we do in 10 years, what do we do in 20 years to maintain our facility, and what funding is necessary to make sure that we're getting the most use out of each building.
Because I know when they go into some of these areas, like you say, like with Red Rock, Montovo, like for example, like Montovo, they're down there redoing the city is down there redoing the sewer lines in the streets. So that would affect the school because they're redoing the sewer lines, they're putting in new sewer lines in that school that was built back in 1955. So that's going to affect the school. So now that's going to be new plumbing. Then you have Red Rock, which you go in the area, they upgraded the plumbing, the sewer lines in the street. So that's going to affect the school because now you go from a different size to what they're putting in now. So I appreciate your question, your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, or a few questions.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Yvette Williams for the record. I have a couple questions. I'm looking at, can you explain to me this 5-year FCI? I think you said your benchmark is 0.60, is that correct?
The current CPSD policy is to consider a campus for replacement when the FCI exceeds 0.6.
So I'm looking at Von Tobel and it's 0.82. So it's higher than Red Rock actually. So I have a few questions to compare the reasons why I'm kind of looking at Red Rock gets a new school, but Van Tobel gets renovate. Because it seems to me that the cost to replace, we're much closer to cost to replace, or time to replace, I should say, time to replace. So in comparison to the recommendations to put in 29 million versus replacing, how does that compare in cost? And then longevity, because these modernizations you're talking about doing, does that mean that we're going to get another 50 years and only require renovations in 25 years after you do this modernization? Or what are we looking at as far as cost to keep Von Tobel up to par? Sort of like having that old car that you keep throwing money at, and at some point you say, let's go ahead and get the new car. My other question is, it doesn't say how many portables Von Tobel has. It says excessive. Do you know how many portables are on that site by chance? That was my other question for that.
Yeah, so multiple part question, and I'll refer to Rick Baldwin for the number of portables because I know he can pull that information quickly.
And then also if you can address number of students, are we over capacity there or are we okay on capacity?
Rick Baldwin can give us an exact number of students also. However, I'll answer your other questions while he looks that information up.
Okay.
So every time that we make an investment in a school, whether it's a new HVAC system or we repair a door, it impacts the FCI index. So while Red Rock's FCI index is lower, that's because previously we have invested significant amounts of money into that school. We replaced the entire HVAC system 10 or 15 years ago. It was poorly done. Red Rock was built in 1953. If Red Rock met our capacity needs, our recommendation would be to renovate that building. However, even if we renovate the building, it does not meet our capacity needs. Vontobel, on the other hand, has had much less work over the years done to it. And we anticipate, because that work has not been done, that it will deteriorate faster. So the 5-year FCI calculation is a predictive calculation based on the work that we've done to the school and what work isn't done and how much we intend on investing. So if we invest no money in Vontobel, we anticipate that asset to deteriorate at a much faster pace. And then Rick, did you have those numbers available for us?
Yes, I do. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Vontobel Middle School has 11 portable classrooms, and for capacity, they are right below capacity. They're at 97.5% of capacity. This school year, they, just for the anticipating the question, they had in March 1,223 students enrolled with a capacity of 1,254.
Okay, and so we're not really projected to grow that population there at that middle school, because I know this is an older neighborhood, so not like some of the newer areas. So that was my question about that. And then, because I know like at Mabel Hogarth, for example, what they did with that old school was, instead of replacing all of the classrooms and the cafeteria and all of that at that elementary, that's Mabel Hogarth Magnet School, they just gave them a new office, basically administrative offices, built a new building in the front, which gave a nice facade, but behind house is still very old. And so I'm wondering if, well, I'm just was wondering the comparison between Vontobel and that, and why we're making that decision to not replace Vontobel. What would it cost to replace the school?
The current entry school prototype is approximately $85 million.
Okay, we're talking, this is a middle school though. So is it more for middle school for Vontobel?
$85 million.
Yeah, I'm in a middle school. The current middle school prototype that we are building, we just built J.D. Smith, and we're building one at Mountain's Edge, approximately $85 million.
Okay, 85 million new. And we're talking about putting almost 30 million, $55 million difference. And so with these renovations that you're talking about doing, this full renovation to extend the useful life, how many years will we get in useful life from this modernization?
We anticipate that structurally the building is sound for the next 50 years, and we will require one more major renovation in that time period.
Okay, within the 50 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then my question for Bonanza High School is, you mentioned, that there was nothing done in the interior. Everything has been done outside. They're at 0.45, which is almost half. With the additional funds, because you're talking about investing an additional 54 million, correct? From what's already been done, because you said you did the HVAC already and the.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So this is an additional 54 million is what we're talking about to do other things other than HVAC and their, what was the other thing we did? The roof. So this would be other modernizations other than HVAC and roofing.
Yes, ma'am. This would address major systems like plumbing, electrical, IT infrastructure, finishes, carpet, those types of issues.
Okay. When we say carpeting, would that also be flooring?
Yes, ma'am.
The what do you call it?
VCT?
Yeah, well, you know, the flooring for because some of that, the vinyl that's on the floor is very old as well. So would that include all of that as well?
Yes, ma'am. The intent is to bring the facility to current standards.
Okay. And so then this would then give us an additional 50 years is what with regular maintenance every 25, right?
Yeah, we anticipate that structurally we'll get another 40 to 50 years out of the building, and then with appropriate maintenance, that this would require one more major renovation in that time period. So we're not anticipating that we'll get 50 years out of an HVAC system. We'll have to address that kind of at midway.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Does anybody else have a question on this item? We're on 3.05, the comprehensive renovation program.
Jeff, thank you for the presentation. As you get planning underway for some of these projects, do you have any concerns around any COVID-related code changes or potentially any upcoming guidance from CDC that might change plans or change design, or do you feel you can pivot efficiently if some of those things come midstream?
Jeff Wagner for the record. Mr. Conrad, obviously with the unknowns, we do have some concerns. We don't know exactly what standards we'll be held to. However, there are always changes in design and construction projects. So our team is at the ready to understand that in greater detail. Obviously, we have to go through the design phase, which includes working with stakeholders, making sure that we meet the current codes, and if we are required to do additional things because of COVID-19, that may impact the budget, and we'll bring that information back to this committee and in any further revisions to the bond fund. So I know that's not a very precise answer for you, but we're aware of the possibility, and we will take the appropriate mitigating actions during the process.
Thank you. And then one additional question. I think a recurring theme in this committee meeting has been technology, and given the current situation that we're all dealing with, it's reasonable to be concerned about technology. Are you factoring in technology needs, not just needs that have always been there, but needs that have maybe are being surfaced with what we've learned over the past few months with lack of network infrastructure or technology devices and things like that? Are you handling those things in these plans as well?
So our current standard, Mr. Conrad, is one-to-one Wi-Fi within the school building. So that will be addressed, and the local area network will be upgraded with Wi-Fi access points that will accommodate that load. What we are currently discussing with using school buildings to act as Wi-Fi hubs for the neighborhood, that wouldn't be in this particular number, but we will address it in design if that is the desire moving forward, that the schools become Wi-Fi hubs for the neighborhood. Part of the limits to that is Wi-Fi only has so much distance available. So I think they told me the Wi-Fi access points can transmit for about 300 feet. So if you look at the Bonanza campus, even if we put Wi-Fi access points on the outside of the building, 300 feet will barely get you out of the parking lot. And when you get out of the parking lot, you'll be in CSN's parking lot. So we're looking at, I know our technology department is looking at the feasibility of technology like that, but students will certainly have one-to-one Wi-Fi on campus, and they will have integrated teaching systems in the classroom. So smart projectors, things of that nature will be put in each classroom as part of this renovation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question for Jeff on number 3.05? I don't see anybody asking a question. Thank you very much, Jeff. Moving to section 3.06, questions and or removal of items from motions and taskings. Is there any, before we begin, is there anything that people believe they can remove from motions and taskings?
Jacob.
Yes.
Gail, Facility Services Unit. The items on motions and taskings that state presented with a date, we are asking if there could be a consideration from the committee to remove those.
I would actually make that motion myself, the list that was sent to us, and I would make the motion that those be removed, or I ask someone else make the motion. I guess I'm not supposed to make the motion, but go ahead.
Jacob, this is Patty Charlton. I'll make that motion on your behalf.
You make the motion.
Frank Walters, I second it.
Second. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor of, oh wait, Yvette has a discussion on this point, on the motion.
On the student safety and building enhancements, we had a presentation on October 17th, 2019. That was prior to me coming onto the board, I believe, or around that time that I came. So I guess my question regarding student safety and building enhancements, has that been resolved? That agenda item, where are we on that? What is the status on that? Because it's kind of so, and that's a very important issue, especially considering a lot of the issues we've had around some of the on campuses in certain neighborhoods.
So this was for me to answer, at least on my part, or request for motion, that was something that was presented. And so the request on the motions and tasking was simply that there be a presentation on it. They did that presentation. The presentation involved what they are doing to resolve the security issues. And so that was not an action item though. And we're not, when there is an action item on certain security measures, that would be brought to us again if it required our approval. But the presentation that was given, from what I remember, was it was requested to know what is being done to enhance security, and that presentation was given us. So the presentation was the resolutions that are being put into place.
I'd like to ask for consideration of the members to have an update on that, because we're still hearing things that are concerned on some of the campuses. And so maybe we can get an update report on where we are. Has all of those requests been met? Are all the schools now really in that process of getting to the schools? And I know we did get some money related to specifically addressing school safety and actually improving school safety, enhancing the building itself. Electronic door openers and security gates, things like that.
Okay, what I would think would help on this was just to help with the board to clear the decks, as it were. If you that would like to make, so the next part of this point 3.07, or excuse me, 3.06 is to put items on the motions and taskings. I think this motion will clear it so they can kind of clear their backlog of what's on the motions and taskings, and then I would certainly support a motion to put that back on for a new task if you wanted to put it on the motions and taskings again.
Okay, that sounds good. That was the only one I had a question on. I agree, the others are pretty old.
Okay. Patty, you had something?
Yeah, so Jacob, if I could just please add, and to Ms. Williams' point, I think that's a good synopsis of where we've been, because I know I feel like I've only been here for a year, but you will say, oh no, it's been a lot longer. But one of the things I wanted to say is that we wanted to kind of close that gap, and we were dealing with obviously a school safety issue that was a little bit different, and we really needed to have those presentations, and I think the chief came in and did that. It doesn't mean that the issue goes away. And I think, obviously, when we open it up for some new items, I'd like to add one as well. But I do support Ms. Williams' request as well. Let's clear the deck. Let's start afresh. Let's kind of get that back to those areas that are most critical. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Can you restate the motion, please?
The motion was to remove all items from the motions and taskings where it indicates that that has been presented to the Bond Oversight Committee.
Okay.
All right, and I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? All right, motion passes. apart from that motion, is there any other things that people would like to remove from motions and taskings?
Add or remove? Can I just clarify?
Remove. At this point, I'm asking if there's anything else that anybody would like to remove.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, appearing none. Ms. Williams, would you like to make your motion for adding something to motions and taskings?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to add an update report or status report, I should say, a status report on all the schools in CCSD, where we are as far as the enhancements, building enhancements, student safety protocols put in place.
Okay, building enhancement and safety. And actually, you know, I just really want to know what's happening with the children, who's learning there. And as far as public safety, because they have so many infractions around behavior, what I really like to know what's happening in those campuses where data is being collected and behavior has impeded the students' ability to be successful.
As it relates to school safety. Yeah, that's what I'm asking for. Status report, basically, an update status report on where we are and all that. And I know what dollars as well in that status report, what dollars spent.
Do you have a second, or do you have a question?
No, see, I'm just really trying to understand a status report on the money allocated to certain schools. And see, bond money is voted on, and then how you're using the bond money to help promote safety, I guess, at all your facilities, but then how they've chosen, they made restrictions on the money as to how the money can be spent in the older schools, in the older environments where the buildings are dilapidated. But guess what? They had to set aside money in when they made those buildings as to how they were going to maintain them and actually select a process in which the schools are going to be maintained. That's how come there's facilities and maintenance people within inside districts. But if they haven't planned for the maintenance, it's an issue. So shall we continue?
I have an additional request, just raising my hand when Ms. Williams is.
Okay. Does anybody have a second to Ms. Williams' motion?
I will second that.
Okay. Chad's going to second. All right. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor of the motions to add that to motions and tasking, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, non-opposition. Add that to motions and taskings. Mr. Conrad, did you have something also for motions and taskings?
Yes. My request, I don't think needs a presentation necessarily, but possibly just an additional handout for the by the next meeting of just some additional detail on the overall kind of total bond stack that we have. So, you know, for each of the issuances of bonds. So for all the tranches, just some information on what the spread is.
Mr. Jones keeps on unmuting himself because I think he has something to say, but then they keep muting him because they're not in control of the controls in the room.
Rate, costs associated with those, just kind of a breakdown of the different bonds issued, cost spread, and then potentially if there's a new issuance completed by our next meeting that you know would be helpful to see as well, just to have a document as a point of reference.
Okay. You were, I don't know if it was just me, but I was getting a lot of feedback while you were talking. So could you please just restate your motion for everybody to hear?
Hey, Jacob, can I ask a quick question, if it's okay with Chad, really quickly? Should this be in 3.07 future agenda items, or is this in the motions and tasking? Because I'm a little confused on where we need to add something that we'd like to have a presentation on.
So the agenda item, this is appropriate in motions and taskings. He's asking for a presentation or to have the staff do something specifically, and then they come back and present on it. And then it can stay on motions and taskings, which is why we just cleared the deck on all the things that have had presentations after they were added to motions and taskings. But motions and taskings is an assignment to the staff to get something done, and this would be appropriate for what he's asking.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification.
Chad, can you please restate your motion, and everybody else stay on mute while he does that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Jacob. Thank you. I'm just looking for, again, it doesn't have to be an in-depth verbal presentation necessarily, but some sort of a document handout for the next committee meeting that just shows some additional detail on each of the issuances of bonds, so the entire debt stack, and some additional pieces of information on each issuance. So spread rate, issuance costs, just to give a point of reference as we look at new bond issuance forthcoming, as a point of reference for where we have been in the past, and then just if that new issuance in June happens before our next meeting, to include that as well on the list.
Okay, Mr. Faust, did you understand? Is that a sufficiently clear motion for you to understand?
Sorry, I had to get the right mouse, the right computer. Yes, I understand it.
All right, we have a motion. Does anybody have a second to the motion?
Second.
A motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed to the motion? Okay, passes. Anybody else have an item to add to motions and taskings? Patty.
Yeah, so I'd like to also ask for kind of a follow-up. I think the presentation from Trustee Wright was very good regarding the kind of returning to campus. I do think that's something that we need to be kind of mindful of, specifically as there may be some facility modifications and or revisions to the locations. But if we could possibly have a report at our next meeting regarding where that status is on the return to campus and to the different schools, and what the mission is going to be to ensure the health and safety of our children.
All right. So are you asking that an additional motion, or is that something you want to combine with the vet's previous presentation request?
I think it's no. I think the safety issue is one that's not a public safety issue. What is the reopening of the schools look like in this post? Well, it's not really even post-pandemic, but in the existing COVID-19 response, and what I think it's the questions that Mr. Goins and others and Mr. Jones asked as well. When are you opening schools? What is it going to look like? And what is that going to mean for our families, and then also for our students? So it's more of a health issue, not so much a public safety issue. I'm sorry. Thank you for that.
All right, Ms. Wright, yes.
So this isn't really an answer to that question, but I also just wanted you guys to all be aware that we did open up a survey for the community at large to take today to give us some feedbacks and voice your concerns and give some input. So please look. I know superintendent has put it out, CCSD's put it out. Some of the trustees have put it out. I haven't put it out yet on social media, but not that this answers that question specifically, but I wanted you guys to know that there is a survey out there that we want community members, staff, teachers, everybody to start giving some input, because we know this is a big lift, and I'm happy to give a presentation or even just email you guys through staff as we are moving through this process and give you updates. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. So that information, we have a motion. Ms. Charlton's motion. Anybody second?
I'll second Yvette Williams.
Second by Yvette Williams. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, no opposition. Anyone else have something to add to motions and task orders? All right, nothing else to add. We move to the next agenda item, future agenda planning.
Mr. Chairman.
Anybody have an additional agenda item for future agenda planning?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Williams.
I didn't have anything to add to our last item, but I did want to ask the question, when might we get some of these other issues that we have on here addressed? For example, I'm looking at the district-owned land that's been recommended for sale, and that's been on the books since September 2018. So are we going to get a report on this, or is this something that we should discuss at removing? Does this body still want to? I wanted to wait until you got through your additions before I brought up a change.
Jeff Wagner, Ms. Williams, that presentation is currently being developed. It's been reviewed by the superintendent, and we plan on having it on the next agenda.
Next agenda. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jeff, if I could just follow up on that as well with Jacob. I know that Linda Perry is has also been in constant communication. We actually had a meeting to discuss some of the challenges and just look at that parcel or the maps across the valley of those different components. So that was, I probably should have referenced that in my earlier meeting, but we met some time ago and it's been a little bit distant. So really wanted to thank Linda Perry for her work to assist in informing my role in this committee. I'm so sorry. Thanks.
Thank you both. Is there any other items for discussion on new agenda items? Okay, now seeing no new agenda items being asked for, moving to the next item on our agenda, 4.01, public comment. Valerie, and I guess Valerie would be able to answer this. I assume that's the same result as the previous public comment, isn't it? You're on mute still. Valerie. Still can't hear you, Valerie.
Here we go. How's that? There are none. None.
Thank you very much. Moving from public comment. Motion, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I did have a question,
Okay.
or clarification on the subcommittees.
Okay.
I signed up for a subcommittee, but I haven't heard anything. So being fairly new to this process and this committee and how you function, how often do these subcommittees meet? What should be my expectation?
You mean as a liaison?
No, the subcommittees that spoke about when I first came on board and you became the chair, there was a discussion around the different committees that we could be part of, the subcommittees. I was interested in the finance, and there was different subcommittees.
Right. So
subcommittees. Educational outcomes, exactly what we're talking about, and how they're measuring the maintenance of effort for the services being provided to the children, especially children of color. I don't see it, quite frankly. And I'm confused when people don't understand how to ask the right questions. It's just real. We need to know what's happening around student achievement by the third grade, since they had the every child should read by the 3rd grade, and that was not just a Tyrone Thompson or, Thompson bill. It was really a bill that was established by Congress. So it's part of ESSA. It's part of the, Every Child Succeed Act.
So the subcommittees are not bond oversight committee subcommittees. They are committees within the school, like that Jeff works on, that Valerie works on, that different members of the staff work on. Those are where the subcommittees are. The bond oversight committee has a liaison to that. So you are the liaison to the finance subcommittee, and you work with them directly on when you meet with them, what you report back to us. And people on the bond oversight committee, everyone's just capable of reaching out to these committees and working on it, but you are the lead.
Oh, wow. So everybody can reach out to the committee and get the data. So you're asking, when is the data going to be brought back to you? I guess you didn't reach out and get the data. I guess no one is reaching out and getting the data, because the data really doesn't look good for anyone, especially a child of color.
Liaison specifically to report from that committee what you deem is appropriate for us to know.
I see. So it's like more of a liaison role. Okay. And
right.
Is that, so I'm not sure I understand. I don't know that I'm liaison. I think I'd like to know then who is liaison for these different, is there a way we can get an email out from staff advising us all on who's currently liaison for these areas? Because in that way I could direct my question to the liaison on this committee, because they might be able to answer those questions for me without having to talk.
I can chime in on that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So you're welcome. The month of June will be the time that you will vote as a committee for your executive committee. And also during that agenda, we can also add that as an active item for everyone to get refreshed into whatever category of a liaison you are. And then
okay, so Gail Ferguson. We had one of those Gail Fergusons in Sacramento too, probably at the same level. But actually, the Bond Oversight Committee elects a person to represent them, and they participate at the level of superintendent and other higher staff. And they should be bringing the information back to the whole committee so that they can work on the outcomes that they're looking for. But I don't know what the partnership level is, truly, and I don't know who they have appointed to bring back information to the committee.
For example, Mrs. Williams, if you are the liaison, then you would reach out to Rodney. You and Rodney would coordinate your calendars in a way for you to get some of your questions answered. And if you felt that was something that the committee should know about, then you would bring that information back to the committee.
I got you. Okay. And that makes sense. Now I feel a little more comfortable because I was like fish out of water right now.
Sure. Okay. All right. So Ms. Williams, you're if you look at the agenda, 3.02 reports by staff and liaisons, it actually identifies in there who is the liaison to which group currently. And you are not, but we can, like Gail said, and next month we'll be working on this specifically, as well as our own positions on this bond oversight.
Yeah, because I didn't think I was appointed officially. It was a conversation around, think about what you're interested in, and I just expressed an interest. That was it. It wasn't.
Okay.
I don't see this list on my agenda.
It's 3.02 at the very bottom. It says meeting on this date, category, access public, type information discussion. It says report and discussion by staff and or following.
I see it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
But be here next month. That's the important month for all these.
Jacob, I promise to keep this short. So if we wanted to continue as liaisons, is there a process for that? And I'm really glad to have some additional assistance, because I know there was a concern that we really didn't have that structure in place. So that's why I had volunteered for 2. But I love that Ms. Williams is there for the finance side. And again, I have had meetings with Linda Perry specifically on site selection and land use. So I really appreciate that. But obviously we got a lot of great people here.
So yeah, everybody who wants to participate as liaison, the way that the bylaws do the liaisons is specifically that it's an appointment by the chair. And so next month we'll be choosing the chair, and I think it flows from there that who gets appointed to what position. But so far on the board, we've never had an overabundance or a competition on the liaison side of things. So if you want to serve as liaison, I believe you are more than welcome to it. And you just talk with the chair at that time. So next month we'll be choosing our chair for the committee, and then you go from there.
Are the liaisons set? Are those roles kind of predefined? Is that basically in documentation somewhere that these are the only liaisons that we have? We've obviously talked about things like safety and security over the years since I've been on this Bond Oversight Council, and I didn't know if those were pre-described in bylaws or some policy somewhere. Just didn't know if there was a chance to add something.
Good idea.
Nothing. My understanding is that is not, well, I don't know if it's preset what liaisons are or what the committees are that liaisons are able to go to. But I think that'd be something worth, and Gail, I'd ask you to look at this, or whoever could look at this, is to have a presentation on that at the next meeting before we vote and before people are deciding on that. That'll be a decision of the chair. I'm making it known right now that I'm not going to run for chair because I'm actually publicly running for something else.
I see your posters out there.
But so I will not be running and putting my hat in there. But but that would be something helpful to have ready to discuss, Gal, at the next meeting.
Yes, I believe the answer to Ms. Patty's question is that it is listed in the bylaws. But this week we'll make sure that we'll send out the bylaws again to everyone. And I'm pretty sure that that list that we created of liaisons came from the bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so this is the hardest motion to adjourn I've ever tried to get. Look at that.
Is that happening yet?
I'm ready.
Would this one also want to make any amendments to the bylaws?
Please repeat.
Would next month also, I thought that in June is when you also make any amendments to the bylaws, and there was discussions around maybe some of that happening?
I don't believe response.
I want to know who's on their bylaws committee, because that's a problem, because that's what the district establishes, a bylaws committee.
To that, I don't believe the Bond Oversight Committee can make changes to the bylaws. The changes to the bylaws for us occur through the Board of Trustees.
Correct. That's correct.
That's correct. Recommendations, and there was a process, and I thought it was June. No?
June, correct. It is correct.
Recommendations for changes to the bylaws. Okay. So
No.
the reason I brought that up is because if I'm going to your point, Patty, and I agree with you, if there is, like, I think we should have a safety and security for school. But if we decide that, then we can make a recommendation next month at the meeting for that. So I don't know, Mr. Chairman, do we need to make that an agenda item also to look at any changes to the bylaws?
So are you saying recommendations to make changes to the bylaws?
Recommendation, I should have said that different. Recommendations for changes to the bylaws.
Well, I have no problem with that being a future agenda item, if that's what you want to do. But once again, I'm not sure what the process is, if we are even responsible for making those recommendations, or if
That's written in law, so we don't have to worry about it. He should go back and get the law and explain to what the law says, what everybody voted on in the state of Nevada.
it's just something you show up to a Board of Trustees meeting and make the recommendation to the Board of Trustees, and it gets done through the Board of Trustees.
I got you.
Yeah,
Well,
Jacob, I'm sorry. I know you're trying to, and oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to ask, I'm hoping that that's the purpose also, and I'm glad that Trustee Wright's here. But obviously, something as important and significant, I'm hoping that, you know, we don't want to take a year to make a change to a bylaw so that we can get the business done, that we're taking care of our kids and our faculty and staff. So perhaps, I don't know what that process might look like, but we really know that, you know, we have a lot of bureaucracy as well, just in our public sector. So if we can make recommendations to the bylaws, is there any way that we can do that just to add a liaison? That's all I think that's all we're asking for, to take care of those very important things. So perhaps Trustee Wright can help.
So Jacob, can I jump in?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so you're working hard to wrap this up, buddy. I appreciate you're doing a great job. But okay, so the way it works in other groups or committees is the group or committee will meet and have recommendations that they would like to see changed in their bylaws. So like AZAC, for instance, right now we're working through that process. They made some recommendations as a commission that they would like to see changed in their bylaws. Then what happens is staff usually goes through and works with possibly one or two, either a trustee and then somebody else in cabinet to kind of,
and somebody from the Bond Oversight Committee. It's a community thing. So the community establishes the rules. It's just so unfortunate that we believe that there are secret committees that are establishing the rules on the use of public funds.
I go through and see if there's anything else that needs to be cleaned up. Usually it's language, like now we would need to add in, you know, teaching and learning versus, you know, this or that, and just kind of those kinds of things, and make sure that
so why would teaching and learning not be a part of the Bonds Oversight Committee's responsibility when they should be looking at the data and the outcomes and where they need to have additional services? I'm just confused.
everything is cohesive, and then that recommendation would come forward to the board on an agenda for the board to then decide if they want to accept those recommendations on that, those changes to the bylaws. So probably what I would suggest is for you guys to put this on your motions and tasking, that you want to discuss changes to your bylaws, and maybe even form possibly a smaller group that.
Okay, so now I'm concerned. Now I really want to know, what is the focus and the intent behind the Bond Oversight Committee, and how they use the funds? And what are the recommendations about the Bylaws Committee and how they were appointed? And what is the maintenance of effort for the Bylaws Committee? Not bylaws, but the Bond Oversight Committee. I guess I'm talking about the wrong thing. I'm talking about Bylaws Committee for the Bond Oversight Committee, but they establish their own rules and how they work. But they must meet the final objective, which is to increase educational options for all children. And I don't see that.
Did some offline work where you didn't break open meeting law to work with a couple of staff members, and then bring it back to the group as a whole. And then, you know, if people had, you know, I really want to add this, or I really don't think we should change that. And then staff would bring that forward as an agenda item through to the board.
Thank you for that process. Makes sense.
And again, I'm happy to help. So, you know, I know that it sometimes seems weird because, you know, bylaws aren't something we change all the time. And with this situation, there's been some need to change some things. We get it. So, staff, if you know, you need to work with Cindy Crone, please reach out to her, and she is happy to help guide you through the different steps. I know that she does this all the time with, you know, we've done it with audit committee fairly recently. Again, we're just working on it with AZAC, and so you know, she's there to help support. So,
because if I'm not mistaken, I thought the very first meeting, or maybe it wasn't the first meeting, it might have been the second meeting, we were at a school. I'm trying to think what school it was. And I thought one of our staff members was walking through everything with all the changes that happened, like right around that time. And there was something that wasn't correct. And I thought she said we need to fix that because it's not addressed in the bylaws. Does that ring a bell for anybody else? No? Okay. Well, anyway.
All right.
That's your cue, Jacob.
I'm waiting for the motion. Calling for the motion. Byron, do you have a motion?
Maybe you're off for the record.
Debbie, motion. Byron, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Well done today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the patience and working with us on it.
Good luck, Jacob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody be safe. Be safe.
Be safe, be healthy. God bless.
Have a blessed holiday.
Yes, Memorial.
How do you leave the meeting?
You just end the meeting. How do you leave the meeting?
Just hit the. There we go. There you go.
All right, we can stop the recording. I will say tune in to the next recorded public meeting that I record and share.